Hey, and welcome back to the Astro All-Stars podcast. I'm your host, Vanessa Montgomery, and today we're going to talk all things Aquarius with Rose and Alyssia. So I'm just going to introduce you guys, Rose Blakelock and Alyssia Osario. Just quickly so people can find you, roseblakelock.com.
Yeah,
it's your name
right.
now.
Yep.
And I was just going to copy and paste that. And Alyssia, you're at Alyssia of Cups on IG and Alyssia.space.
Yes, and what's funny about my name going into this Aquarius discussion is that the I is silent, so it's Alyssa.
Alyssa.
No, it's totally fine. Which of course I have like a sneaky little name in queer little Aquarius. So
I love it. And Rose, on IG, your Mutable Cross, and people can also find you at Big Dyke Energy Podcast, which I love, which seems shadow banned because it never comes up and I have to type the whole thing in if I want to have a listen.
We are deeply shadow banned and also refuse to bleep anything. So
yeah. Oh, right.
Aquarian stubbornness, honestly.
Yeah, good. So you should. I mean, I don't see why there's a problem, but anyway. And so what's everyone's Aqua placements? Let's do a little bit of roll out our Aqua points and see if we make a stellium. We'll start with you, Rose.
I actually only have an Aquarius sun and it's in the 12th house. So it could be a little hard to find.
I don't know. You seem to be doing pretty well with that one placement. And Alyssa, what's yours?
I have a Aquarius sun and an Aquarius Venus, and that Aquarius sun is my chart ruler, so I love it oh so much.
Awesome. Okay. And I just have the North Node in Aquarius and the MC, so no actual planets. We're going to work with what we've got. So it's aspiration. It's an aspirational sign for me with the North Node there.
That's what we see though, right?
I try. Got my glasses on. I read a lot. So do you relate to the Aqua archetype? Let's start with you, Alyssa. Do you relate to the Aqua archetype? And then, of course, I've got the extra questions of what do they get right? What do they get wrong about Aquarius? You know, what do you relate to the most? And what do you wish people would just stop making memes about because it's just not right? So misunderstood.
So I relate heavily to the Aqua archetype. I feel like since I was a little kid, I thought I was an alien. Like I was like, I don't understand what people do. I feel very different. And at night, I would look at like airplanes or anything going really fast in the sky and I'd be like, that's the UFO's coming to get me, pick me up, take me home to like whatever planet I'm supposed to be on. And so since I was like little, loved the Aqua archetype. And when I was in middle school, I got my first astrology book. It was called Dark Side Astrology. And I remember pulling up the charts of my friends, like the circle charts, a middle schooler, and making stories for them based on their signs. So I feel like that is like little Aquarian kid looking into the esoteric. And in terms of like the memes, honestly, Aqua PR headquarters is doing a great job because everyone thinks I'm humanitarian. If I do something a little selfish, it's because I'm like, aloof and like hard to understand. And so I do say that the memes, I think, go easy on us compared to, say, Gemini and Scorpio. And so, yeah, I feel like I get away with a lot.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. It's funny you're looking up all your friends because that, you can look at, well, that's quite social, isn't it? You're interested in the group and it's a way in. It's like an entry point to understanding them. and
Yeah, and
talking
they
about
loved
them.
being seen. They love that like Aqua, like, you know, I'm gonna see myself through seeing you.
Yeah. Very interesting. And the darks, that book sounds familiar. It's like one that kind of it makes fun of the signs, the dark side astrology. Is that right?
Yes, it makes fun of all the signs. There's like love compatibility, enemy compatibility. It's really, really fun.
It sounds really fun. I love books like that. I wish I could think of things like that. I would love to write one, but I don't think I'd make it funny enough. And the Sagittarius would be like, don't say mean things. I'm too much of a hype girl. And what about you, Rose? What do you relate to with the archetype, and what do you wish the memes would get right?
I mean, it's hard. As I mentioned, I have this 12th house sun and like a shit ton of Pisces and mutable energy. So sometimes I don't really know what is what. But as far as like being really future oriented, the communal concern, and like the desire for people to just self-govern, take care of themselves, mind their own risk. Like, I don't want to be a cop. I don't want to be in charge. I don't think we need cops if everybody could just kind of get their own shit together, right? I also sometimes a little distant. I'm a little aloof. Sometimes I sound like an asshole when I'm like really not trying to be. Which like I think that's peak Aquarian behavior. Like we're really just like don't realize the way something sounds until it comes out. Like it's that like just the facts or the like data speak, right? From Star Trek, where you just kind of like, oh, there should be emotion attached to this statement. Like, why? I also really love like tech and gadgets and synthesizers and like finding ways to kind of blend the like the ancient and the modern. Like I have a record player that's actually vertical because my cat used to like always fuck with the records. But a friend came over and was like, that's some Aquarian ass shit right there,
Yeah, it
What's
sure
happening?
is.
I can't deal with arbitrary authority. I don't like being told what to do. I feel like that's also super Aquarian. Um, and yeah, too much emotion. Sometimes I don't know how to respond to. Like I freeze in the moment. Which I feel like is also an Aquarian thing. But I think what they get wrong is it's not that we don't have feelings. It's just that we are also like, hold on, are my feelings more important than other people's? Let me take a step back. Like, I feel like the distance is actually because we give too much of a shit and we need to figure out like what's actually fair and what's actually important in the bigger picture. And where can I kind of try to just get over my fucking ego? Sorry, am I allowed to cuss?
Yeah. I just put explicit when it comes to posting.
Okay.
That's all.
All right.
Yeah, that's interesting with the space, and there's over the past few years, there's been this whole thing. It's sort of dropped away now, but the holding space, I guess it's the making of space more so. Let's see what's in here because I care. I'm making the space between us. It's still involving the other person. Yeah, the detachment. And Rose, it's interesting. You can see the blend of the Aquarius sun in the 12th house, obviously, to blending in with the music, but you're still all teched out.
Oh, yeah.
And Alyssia, you do like community organizing and stuff like that, which is hyper Aquarius. And it does sound pretty humanitarian.
Oh, yeah, it is. I have been organizing since I was in high school. And so when I was 16, and going back to what Rose said about authority, there was a plan by the Tea Party in the US, which is like a very right-wing political party, to shut down my high school because they didn't want to pay taxes to it anymore. And we were in a burgeoning like drug epidemic. So having kids be really isolated and going to different schools just wasn't going to be good for us. So I, of course, was on student government. I knew that like it was wrong. And so I go to the board of ed and I make my little speech. And this woman looks at me and is like, why do you think you have a say if you don't pay taxes? And I was like, it's my school. And so, of course, I fought it. And all the kids in my town told their parents to vote. The kids in the neighboring towns told their parents to vote. And we beat it back for a little while. I think when I left for college, it ultimately ended up passing. But it was a fun experience to be like a teenager and to be like, you pissed me off and now you're going to feel my collective wrath. And so ever since then, I've been doing, defense against folks who have been like doing know your rights trainings for folks who might be targeted by ICE immigration enforcement here, supporting folks who have been through police brutality or police misconduct. I was a big free education kinds of person when I was in college, doing protests and rallies and creative direct actions. And so I've kind of done it all community organizing wise.
That's amazing. It's so Aquarian. Even to think that you can do that, even to have that understanding is a thing. Like not everyone realizes, but it sounds like you just got it as soon as something constellated to have you step up and pull the crowd together and take it full forward. I have to say the ducks of my high school was an Aquarius, and I always think Aquarians, obviously they're very bright. It's an air sign. She was amazing. So I always have a good view of Aquarians. So that's my aspirational. And Alyssia, what house is your Aquarius sun in and Venus?
Oh, the 7th house, of course.
Oh, 7th.
Yeah.
So even, people.
Yeah. Angular.
Yes. And what was I going to say? Yeah, the points. What am I bringing? The North Node's in the 9th. And I have to say, in Aquarius, and that's how I kind of, from my own journey through the nodes and explaining it to friends and then having them give me feedback on mine. If it's drama in my mind, go north. Go north. It's not Leo time. Go north, step back, be like an Aquarius. What would an Aquarius do? Think about what's happening for everyone else. And it just switches it. It's so great. And the publishing thing, all of that, I feel like that's that North Node in Aquarius in the 9th activated. And Sag is happy with international and writing, 5 planets in Sag. So that just goes really nicely. It's all sextiling and grand trining in there. And the midheaven, I mean, that suits astrology as well. Yes. And looking at, like, I can do all the creative stuff with the Leo, but it just it didn't feel right. So I've gone to writing, not doing just art or being an artist. I just felt like, I've got something to say, so I'm going to use actual words and be more direct with it. And astrology, it's just such a great system to sort of get that message across, I think, as well, plus astrology just by itself. So that's all my Aquarius to bring. So let's cover, I was going to also ask Uranus or Saturn rulership. Do you use one or the other? Do you kind of in your mind now play a bit with both? Obviously, I come from an earlier time of astrology where everything was modern, use Placidus house system. But, we learnt sort of basics as well of traditional. So I've kind of have it in my mind that now traditional is so big, you kind of like, even the 3rd book I wrote in, an ancient ruler, traditional ruler, this. You've got to kind of put it in there because so many people are getting into it. I'm wondering where you two stand on that. I'll start with you, Rose.
I realized another Aquarian signature that I didn't share is Uranus is the most elevated planet in my chart, but Uranus and Saturn are in the same sign and they straddle my midheaven, right? So I actually think both fit and I use them both. I also started out studying modern astrology and I use Placidus houses still. I guess, part of it for me is just people who, like me, like us, we were around during Hellenistic astrology, life would be pretty fucked up for us. Not saying that it's that great now for many people, but like, why do we need to cling so tightly to people who looked at your genitals and decided whether or not you were a citizen, right? Like, that's pretty wild. So traditional astrology, I respect it, and I'm also kind of like, whatever you learn, you use. But for me, I think both bring something to the table. I really like the symmetry of traditional astrology and kind of seeing the different expressions of each planet in their domiciles. Like, I think that's really rad. But I think that modern planets are teaching us something about spiritual evolution. And it like makes sense to me that the water bearer, right, the sign that is sharing knowledge and helping us conduct and convey energy towards progress, would maybe be the first one to cleave off, right? Because Uranus was the first modern planet discovered by accident. I also think, you know, mythologically, we don't get a lot about Uranus, right? It's just long tradition of sky gods. There's like 2 myths, maybe 1. Familial violence, castration, and then the birth of Venus and the Furies. But archetypally, Richard Tarnas and a lot of others tie Uranus to Ganymede and Prometheus, right? And to steal fire from the gods and bring it to the rest of the humanity. That sounds like harnessing lightning, right? That sounds a little Aquarian. And also kind of the idea of the figures in the margins. Prometheus sees the future and suffers for it, right? Doesn't matter if you can predict what's going to happen if you're chained to a rock and an eagle is eating your liver every day. So yeah, I use both. I lean a little more towards Uranus, and I think that partly too is just the contrarian Aquarian in me, that like the more traditional gains traction, the more I'm like, wait, hold on. Are we gonna throw away Stephen Forrest? Like, come on, what's happening?
Yeah, and Richard Tarnas.
Yeah, Richard. You know what I mean? Like, there's I don't know. Maybe I'm gonna get in trouble for this.
No trouble. Who is the one with the cane saying that's right or wrong? There's no one. That's the point. It's an Aquarian type community here. No one. So yeah, don't give that power away. Alyssa, what about you?
Oh, I am fully Saturn, and I can explain why, because
Okay.
I think, you know, there is a common misconception around traditional astrology where it is just based in ancient Greek and, you know, Arabic and ancient Islamic astrologers. They were Black, they were brown. And I think it's really important that while we are critical of the ways in which like Greek mythology has now shaped like our conception of whiteness, it just was incredibly different back then. And when I think of like Queen Baran, who was like a royal and an astrologer, and you know, a woman made the astrolabe, right? Like a woman innovated the astrolabe. So I do, you know, I feel like for me, you know, when y'all are like, are we going to throw out Tarnis and Forrest? I'm like, it's okay if we do. But I also think like, you know, when we think about our conception or our idea that Uranus rules Aquarius, like that was decided in the 1970s. Like, I just feel like we have so much research and so much more tinkering to do to understand the outer planets. And I use the outer planets in my consultations. I just don't think they rule Aquarius. And I see them and I see how they manifest in chart readings. And so, yeah, I'm a Saturn person. And I think for me, I see Saturn as not just the patriarchy and the structure and the fuddy-duddiness, but I do see Saturn in Aquarius, in the Aquarian archetype, as like disrupting and pushing the structure to reform and rebirth something new. And to how do we have like big queer families outside of the structure of heteromonogamy and heteronormativity? Because let's be real, we might need 3 or 4 incomes to support one baby. And and just thinking about like even Valentine's Day, right? We're talking before Valentine's Day, and I think it is a very Aquarian holiday if we only think about going outside of like the structure of like having a big dinner and like sloppily fucking before we go to bed. Like that's not as fun. But, thinking about the ways in which like we honor romance not as like something we're supposed to do, but as something that we want to do and we're going to shape ourselves.
That's a great point to bring up Valentine's Day. I was thinking about that, held during Aquarius season. It is Valentine's Day here in Australia right now because we're a day ahead. And I love that. Is it Amy Poehler? I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Came up with Galentine's Day. And that's very Aquarian, isn't it? I wrote this week's, it's out now, Glamour Horoscopes on Valentine's Day always mention Galentine's, whether you're Valentine'sing or Galentine'sing, because I think it's a lot of pressure for people to be one thing. And yeah, I'm glad she made a word and opened it up. Right?
Yep.
So Saturn, I am going to, but is it contrary? I don't know. I'm going to go with like, it's all right. It's all interesting. I love hearing all the points of view and they are all really valid. Right.
Yeah.
And opens it up more. I'm interested in looking at the foundations, but of astrology and how traditional informs that. The history is super interesting. Definitely agree with Rosary. I get really pissed when I read about the times and how hideous they were for women, like the three of us during most of that time. Yeah, what a life. What a life we would have had.
Yeah, but
not
Alyssia
astrology
brings up
ones.
a good point, right? Of the prehistory, right? The history that we live with that gets espoused the loudest is from the most violent people who conquered everyone before them. And so you're right that it's not just because they got the names on the planets doesn't mean that we should ignore what the Babylonians and the Sumers and folks before them were practicing. That is a really good point.
Exactly.
And I agree with you too about Saturn not just being patriarchy. Dana Rose Harper has like a lot of really wonderful content, and one of the ideas that she talks about a lot is Saturn as the grandmother archetype, which like definitely fucks with, right?
Yeah, I don't structure everything from a patriarchal lens. I know it's been done like that, but as if I'm going to do that. So the third book I've just got out is on the planets. So the Saturn is represented by like a strong looking woman. She's sitting looking quite, I'm owning the joint, very solid. Yeah, I think so too. And in times that were either equal or matrilineal or matriarchal, yeah, Saturn's on woman. So I think, it's everything. It's everything. I just don't like the gendering of the planets unless you're going to mix it up at the very least so we can all see ourselves. I just think bias is underrated. People don't see it if they don't ever get it presented. They'll never see it in you. They'll never see the Saturn in you if they see Saturn as a guy. People will look at all of us and just be like, you have no authority here. You're not an expert, etc. All the Saturn stuff, with respecting your rules, respecting your boundaries, all of those things. Very important. Yeah, interesting. And what about the contrariness? Rose, you mentioned it. Happens to rhyme with Aquarius. Contrariness, Aquarius. Alyssa, do you note any contrary responses in your nature?
Yeah, and I just want to shout out, like Rose was talking about Diana Rose Harper's work on Saturn, which I also really love. And I love like hearing her talk about Saturn. And I think it's so funny that we are also shouting out other people in our community who have like influenced us in this work. Very, very Aquarian.
Yeah, takes a village.
You have
I think
to.
so. It's well, I will say I definitely noticed the contrariness in Aquarians, and sometimes someone I had on for an Aquarius season once on the forecast that I did, I mentioned that and she was not owning it and she was being so contrary. She's just being Aquarian and I was loving it. I love Aquarians, my North Node.
Don't tell me what I am.
Yeah, you're not my real mother. Father, whatever. Yeah, exactly. I love it. Yeah, the rebellion then, a rebel. It's strong. It's strong.
Yes, and it's fun, right? Like,
yeah.
I feel like Aquarians also like what I actually really love about Aquarians is that we can disagree, but we're still like comrades in the end, right? We're still like close. And I feel like that is something that I really value now in my 30s. And, you know, seeing younger generations kind of view conflict as like this end of the world thing. I'm like, no, like we're just disagreeing. We're all friends.
So only child, isn't it? Yes, well, I did have an Aquarian friend recently say I was talking about something and she's like, I don't agree with that. You know, she can say that and we can have the conversation, and that's why I like Aquarians. You can have a good conversation. They're definitely not just going to be on your side or agree with you, or they might sort of agree and yeah, you can just have the conversation. It's such a conversational sign without getting riled, especially these days.
Yeah.
Where everything's so inflamed. So let's cover Aquarius and Queerness, because Aquarius sounds better than Aquarius to my ears. I think it's great. Associated with it, you know, it's a sign I suppose you'd most associate with queerness, and queerness is such a thing. I mean, I think it was coming over the teen years to be such a big thing, but then Saturn in Aquarius, I think it really seemed to explode. I suppose when did it? I don't know. I'm in the Gold Coast in Australia. I think things get here about 10 years later currently, up and down. Like I never heard the word. I came out in like end of 1987. So it's been a while. And the only time anyone said the word queer was, we're here, we're queer, get used to it, which I always like and often will respond in my mind to certain things. And now it's kind of, it's, you know, what is it? Neptune in Pisces, I think, has just kind of opened everything. And then maybe in the lockdowns, people just had a lot more space to kind of reflect on themselves, the internet, and now Aquarius. Any thoughts anywhere with all of that? Maybe with Pluto going forward in Aquarius, or the Aquarius and Aquarius. I guess Rose mentioned Ganymede as well, association. I never really think of that, but yeah, that I suppose in between state, because it's so intellectual, and the intellect doesn't have, you know, it's just not biological. There's no gender to anything. It's that air, no body. Maybe that's part of it.
I mean, to me, yes, Aquarius and Queerness, but also Uranus and Queerness.
Also,
the gays give us art and rage, right? Venus and the Furies, activism and aesthetic, right? Like, we contribute other things, but that's certainly something since the 90s we've really been at the forefront of, and really before that, right? But whether or not we could be visible and vocal comes and goes, right? In Berlin in the 20s, you could be gay, you could be trans, you could be fine. And then what happened? Oh, Uranus rolled into Taurus. Yeah, weird how that happens, huh? I mean, and I also mean queer as in Bell Hook's definition, right? The not queer as in who we sleep with, but queer as being about the self that is at odds with everything around it, and that has to invent and create and find a place to speak and be and thrive and live, right? Like that feels Aquarian. And then there's also this Toni Morrison quote that I love, and she was also born at the anaretic degree of Aquarius. I stood at the border, claimed it as central, and let the rest of the world move over to where I was. Like,
wow.
That to me is queerness, right? Outsiders who can zoom out and focus on the systems and structures of oppression and kind of connect the dots, you know?
Very Aquarius. And it brings up a good point. I'm just thinking of, all the gay people in the arts, exactly, influencing culture, influencing from a place where they weren't allowed to be direct. The Hays Code, you know, we've got so much to blame that for even today. I've been obsessed with the White Lotus. I know, coming in a little bit late, but I did get to binge 2 seasons in a row. Obsessed. And so then I looked at, you know, when I do something, I have to get right into it. So I had to look up Mike White, who wrote it in like 2.5 months. directed it and edited it. Genius. And he's having his Pluto trine right now. So this is like his moment, because I was like, why is this happening for him now? This is insanely just this perfect point. And, you know, he's a gay man. He's gotten to write these gay characters into it. There's just more people getting to that are gay in entertainment and are writing these narratives that can actually be more out. And I think that's really fascinating, actually. But they're still kind of fit the Hays code because they're like a bit psychotic murderers. You know, but that's still in there.
But there's this queer character who's at the margin too, right? It's the hotel manager in both seasons, and they're witnessing the fray, but they're removed, right? And you know, there's some manipulation there, but also they're at the mercy of it.
It's true. And what do you think, Alyssa? Do you have thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I have two stories, but I just also want to note that the most iconic gay line came from Jennifer Coolidge. You know, these gays are trying to kill me. And she has Jupiter in Aquarius in the 6th house. And so
yes, right. Yes. I didn't think to look at hers. Yeah, she was the one that really broke out. Wasn't she? They're saying like she really kind of, it lifted her more than anyone with a comeback as well. And she says, you know, don't worry, at any age it can happen, because, you know, oh, that's very interesting. The gays are trying to kill me to decorate their house. That was hilarious, written by a gay man. I did wonder what gay men thought about that. I did ask one, and he's like, oh, wasn't that into a few things, but yeah, I did think it was quite funny. And I wonder if they'll continue the theme of queer hotel management as well.
I love that for them. Yeah, so I think like what this brought to mind is like two personal stories, which is that when I was like little Aquarius, I started my gay straight alliance in my tiny small town, right? I told you they had Tea Party influence. So yeah, I was like in the founding meeting, and the language that we used back then, I remember like having this like vicious debate over whether like bisexual people should be in the space, which like now, you know, now things have totally changed, right? And this was before like gay marriage was like legalized in New York. This was like, you know, it was a harder time. Like I've lost mentors to AIDS. And so I was like kind of coming up. And it feels weird to say towards the end of the AIDS crisis, because it's like, yeah, the younger folks that are being born into queerness aren't, you know, don't really experience the AIDS crisis in the same way that someone in New York City has.
Yeah.
And now as an adult Aquarius, I got into this program with this organization called the Life Work Project. And I got a certification in supporting queer and trans families through conception, fertility and conception, birth, after birth, how to support people through gender affirming surgery, through like medically or like herbally transitioning, through somatic, so finding out how to like support yourself in your body, through death, and through supporting folks through grief, through abortion, which like here in the States, abortion is about to be a bigger issue. And the space was BIPOC, trans and non-binary people. And I think, you know, back when I was that younger Aquarius in the Gay Straight Alliance, it was like, I would say like, my gender is gay. And now as an adult, I'm like, oh, the word is non-binary. And I think for a lot of us, learning about ourselves, and like, it's like a constant process. And I feel like that's also around queerness and Aquarius, is that we are like, I know so many other Aquarians who are like constantly learning about themselves and like how they identify and their relationship to queerness and like what they want to be. And so I think those two experiences of being in that space and helping other people prepare and traverse through life, I feel like that is like the Aquarian queer principle for me.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's making me think about Aquarians that are, maybe more on the scientific, social, academic, pushing out into areas that, at least for women were not even available, getting in there and starting to influence and change what it even meant to be seen as what is female, and pushing those boundaries for the rest of us coming along. Yeah, it's a really interesting space to talk about in terms of Aquarius. That's a really good point, because it's just all changing so fast, the meaning of things, I think, and people just trying to find a way to get out of these really tight little roles that no one relates to, let's face it. How do we, like, my view is kind of like change that, as well as this is happening to make a space for the possibilities, for the realities as well. But I'm just also like change that too, because that's BS. Yeah, it's very interesting. I'm fascinated by it all, but I'm quite distant from it all where I live.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that it came to mind as well is kind of, if we think about Leo and Aquarius as sibling signs in opposition, and Leo as children, and like this kind of idea of legacy and a more traditional family structure, and Aquarius is other people's children and chosen family, and also like groups and associations that are based upon your ideals and your visions for the future and what you want to be building together, rather than we share DNA, right?
Yeah, that's true. Squad goals. I'll just boil that down.
I like that.
Yeah. Squad goals. And as a Sagittarius, I love Aquarius. I think I relate the most because of the space. We're both signs of friendship and larger groups, not based on money. Like, I love Capricorns, but there's still the structure in the business, and I just didn't relate to the 80s. They were so Capricorn. I just started to come into my own when those outer planets went into Aquarius. It was great. But I appreciate them, and I learn from them, and a good friend helps me in the world that is a Capricorn. But I'm looking forward to Pluto going into Aquarius. I hope that's what it brings, more of an influence of the social connection, not based on money. We'll get to that. Actually, we'll get to that. Yeah. So Aquarius and Queerness is what we're talking about. So I think that's everything for that one. Anything else?
I think Aquarians are also just really hot. Like, they are hot as gay people. So
well, I guess if they've got that sort of androgynous thing they're bringing as well, it's their, snappy dresses, or at least unusual. Yeah, it sort of fits the queer mold as well. I love Aquarians. I'm out here waving the flag.
Even if it's that, there's like kind of congenial Aquarians, right? That like the Sheryl Crows of the world, where you're like, wait, you're an Aquarius? But even still, there's like something that just like rubs against the grain, right? Like Sheryl Crow will write an upbeat ass song that is so depressing when you listen to the lyrics, and you're like, okay, that's how you snuck it in.
Yeah. With talking about all the big ideas, but still in a happy upbeat, not minor keys. Major keys.
Because we study people, right? It's like we're sitting here like, how do humans human? All right, this is how it goes.
How do humans human? Yes. Always good for a chat. I quite like that. A chat about broad things that aren't so personal always. And that's nice, because I hate talking about like how to solve a problem that's, I don't know, the door on the laundry. It's so boring. So boring.
My Virgo moon is like, wait, what's happening? I can help you.
I can help you with that. That's what the earth sign friends are for. They're like, yeah, you just use this. Anyway, not practical person here in some ways. Let's move on. So the Saturn handover to Pluto. Okay, let's go there. This is a big deal for Aquarians. So, of course, Pluto's been in Saturn the last couple of years, moving into Aquarius. You get what? Is it a month, 3 weeks of no planets in Aquarius? And then you get the Pluto, the crushing transformational Pluto over 20 years, 18.6, whatever it is. Yeah. You both have, Rose, you have a late, this is going to be 2 decades away for you, right?
Yeah, which I'm thankful for. But Saturn is like literally on my sun. I get the exact conjunction on my solar return.
Yeah. So that could be interesting to take note of the themes that may reoccur more deeply. And Alyssa, what degrees your Sun and Venus?
My sun is at 8 degrees and my Venus is at 29 degrees. If I was born 6 hours later, I would have had a Venus in Pisces, but she said, hell no.
Just got in there. Okay, so yes, you two are having the Sun-Venus connection here, conjunction, Saturning. So you'll pick up that conjunction much earlier. This will be interesting. So yeah, your Sun, no, Venus is, Sun is conjunct my North Node. Oh, aspirational. There you go.
There you go. Yeah, so, yeah. How's that Saturn Venus for you, Alyssa?
Yeah.
Honestly, like, I'm not gonna lie, it's great. What is really funny is I had to get dental surgery, so you can clock the missing tooth, but people think I look hotter. And so like you would think like it's like less people coming in, but I feel like it's been like wearing my mask and going to a party and like dirty dancing with people on the dance floor. And I just feel like it's like I it's just like strong sensual energy, which is like
yeah, right.
Yeah, so Saturn on Venus has been really good to me.
That's interesting. That is interesting. And yeah, and just as a quick background, Alyssa's had to take basically last year and part of this year off because of a massive health crisis, which is dental. So, I mean, that's kind of Saturn-y, isn't it? It's just like, we're going to slam you to the left here, but then you're feeling some positives out of it.
Yeah, that was Mars and Gemini for sure. I think people, I feel like Saturn is like teeth as bones. And like Mars is like teeth as like gnashers and like biters and rippers. And so when Mars peeked into Aquarius, I was like, oh, something's gonna go on. And it's funny because when Mars went into Gemini, and when Mars is leaving Gemini is when I'm gonna get like the implant put in. So it's like it's so synchronous.
Isn't that interesting? That's Marsy. And I wonder if the Saturn on the Venus is a little bit like, do you feel like it's a little bit like a Capricorn Venus?
I feel like I kind of side eye people when they say like Saturn is daddy, but it has made my Venus go from like, I think like airy, fairy, like floating around, elusive, to like daddy. And I feel like there is like a sensuality to Capricorn Venus that I really love. But I honestly feel like my Venus has gotten hornier, which is so funny to me.
Well, it's interesting because Saturn like the horny goat. Yeah. And yeah, even if it's in Aquarius, still that harks back to Pan.
There's also that like there's maturation that like doesn't feel good, but there's also like when somebody is like growing into themselves and just like able to like command space, that I feel like could very much be that. Like you're like, oh yeah, you take me serious now, you better.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. I like that.
I like that too. I think Saturn gets a bad rap a lot of the time, but yeah, I think it's a really useful transit. Definitely
it's
can
also,
be.
the outer planets I feel like is like such a riddle and you have no control, but I feel like Saturn is like kind of straightforward. It's like, here's the assignment. Are you going to do your homework, or are you gonna fuck off? And if you fuck off, like, doesn't make the work go away, it just makes you look like a schmuck.
It's true. Yeah, that's true. It's got rules, it's got regulations. You follow them, you follow through, and things are going to work out just fine.
Yeah, it's not to punish you. It's to be like, hey, if you want to take it to the next level, here's your weak spots. Here's the stuff you're insecure about. Do you want to give it some attention, or do you want to just pretend it's not happening?
So, Rose, you're getting the Saturn conjunction coming in. Can you see what that might be? Is this the landlord?
I think it's partly the landlord. I think it's just like, what do I mean? I think it's just like, it feels like an opportunity for me to be taken more seriously and take myself more seriously, and to also really focus in on how I do and don't want to be spending my time, and kind of cutting down on side work and really putting the effort into the things that I feel like best actually express who I am and what I have to share with the world,
That's what I think of Saturn too. It just really focuses everything, and you do have to cut what the non-essentials. Makes you do that,
which with 11 mutable placements is confusing.
Yeah, I'm really mutable as well. It's tough to just sit at the desk. It's been like breaking in a horse or something. I think I'm there now.
That's a perfect Sag reference point too, right? To break a horse.
That's what it feels like also for me. But yeah, useful if you go with it. You can really accomplish a lot. So Pluto going in. So I've just written down last time it was in 1778 to 1798. 18.5 years in this sign. It's going in March to June just for a short-term stay. And then January 2024 to September 2024. Is that right? It does a second little, and then just a quick November 2024 to 2044. Long time. Revolutions, enlightenments, artificial wombs. AI. In one word, AI. What do you guys think is coming? What's coming? Do you want to go first or second, Alyssa? Alyssa, let's start.
I can go first this time. Oh my God. This is so, I feel like for me, I'm like excited. I'm also just like seeing the rise of fascism in the United States and Europe, and honestly even in like all over the world, to be honest. I have been really like, it's like now or never, right? It's now or never to like save the environment. I know a lot of people are like, oh, like revolution is like built like day by day, and like people don't think they're gonna see it in their lifetimes, and I'm like, we might see it in our lifetimes. I think for me, I don't want to get into the big debate about which US chart is the right one, because I know that there's a difference between the Sag rising and the Scorpio rising. I am going to be using the US Sibley chart, but folks, use whatever you want. Pluto is about to be going into the United States third house. And to me, that Pluto and Aquarius in the third house, it correlates with that rise and also what we need to do, which is mutual aid and like supporting people. Like if we have a little, we give a little. The ways we can show up, we provide. And that's honestly what's going to get us through this Pluto and Aquarius, because, in the US Sibley chart, the US has a moon in Aquarius. And so that sometimes that can represent the people in mundane astrology. And I am hoping that, when we saw like Saturn go into Aquarius, we saw the rise of social movements. We saw more and more people marching in the streets. But as much as I love a good direct action where people are like standing up to oppression, I think there is so much more we can do in our daily rituals, which I think is also the third house of liberation, of showing up for other people, whether it's doing like volunteering, Meals on Wheels, showing up for our elders, because like Aquarius to me correlates with our elders. And I feel like they've really been left behind in the pandemic. And letting ourselves become good people every day instead of good people maybe when the time calls for it.
Good point. What's that thing that's been coined, that word for you're just kind of online showing you're doing the right thing?
Performative.
Oh, yes.
Performative.
Yeah, like performative action.
Allyship and action. Yeah.
Yeah, don't just do it for the gram.
Mm-hmm.
Do it and don't post it.
Yeah. What's that? I wish
See
I could
how you
remember.
deal.
I was reading a book and I wish I could remember, but they had like a Buddhist teacher come and teach, and like on the chalkboard they were like, everybody wants to save the world, nobody wants to help mom with the groceries. But like the idea that like there's a million tiny ways that you can be easing suffering and like forging connection in this world, and to like lose focus or look for the glory is like not the way, right? If we centralize movements also and put people on a pedestal, at worst the power is going to get to their head and they're going to be corrupted, and at best they become targeted and martyred, like neither of which do we really want, right?
In America.
Yeah, in America.
That's what
right? I don't know what happens over there.
It doesn't happen here. We don't have guns.
Right, that sounds cool.
It's good.
Except you still have a military, like oh, they all gotta go, right? If they're the only ones with guns, I'm even more scared, but it's scary here to be, you know.
Yeah,
but I feel like I just jumped in.
Think communally. That's an interesting point, Alyssia, about the Pluto going into the third house with the US. I hadn't even thought that far ahead, of course. Very interesting.
I mean, in general, Pluto going through any area is showing us what's not working, what we tried to repress or bury, right? It's coming up to the surface and being like, no, you need to deal with this, right? And so with Pluto going through Capricorn, we have seen every ill of institutions and capitalism, right, on full display. That doesn't mean it's been fixed, but like you have to try really hard to ignore it. And so with Pluto going through Aquarius, I'm thinking about tech and its ills, right? But it's also just in general our shadow future, right? I think that we've already been getting it, but as far as the combination also of Uranus and Taurus, like the scale and pace of ecological disasters, and just like, this is what you have sown and now you're reaping it. We still know so little about the ecological and physiological impact of being around cell phones and broadband and breathing in, you know, we've got microplastics in rainwater everywhere, right? So I think that is it's more of this discovery of kind of, oops, here's what we didn't think about. On the bright side though, Pluto is about power, right? And so I do have a certain optimism that power could transfer to the people, right? But there's always a pain portal with Pluto. You don't get that buried treasure without digging in, right?
Yeah, and which people, power to the people, but which people also.
Yeah.
Super interesting. Yeah, it just brings me back again to, there's all those problems with technology and manufacturing, but commercial interests reigned. That's where I really hope that humanitarian social people interests will reign, because otherwise nothing changes if corporations and money and profit are the goal.
Well, and with technology, the whole point of the Industrial Revolution, if we want to talk about Pluto and Aquarius, right, because that was the last time, was supposed to be to reduce labor to give us better lives. And instead, we're replacing artists with AI instead of factory workers, right? Like we are being surveilled at like greater and greater lengths and losing more and more privacy. Big tech is in allegiance with the state. Technological warfare is up. But like, is there going to be a new tech underground? You know? Maybe we can get power from mushrooms. That could be a Pluto and Aquarius thing that I'd be into. But also, like, what I think about, I don't think it's a coincidence. There's like a shit ton of sci-fi movies that are set in this time. Like, I actually went and looked up Terminator. They come back from 2029. Pluto and Aquarius. Tank Girl set in 2033. Pluto and Aquarius. AI, the first part of it's 2042. Demolition Man 2032, right? So in all of these, it's like a shadow future where kind of tech and Big Brother has taken over, right?
Yeah, very interesting. Oh my gosh. I look at the AI and yeah, it's the next revolution, tech revolution or something like an enlightenment, but it not necessarily really good. And I think manufacturing, yeah, maybe it was sold as convenient, but at the end, you know, you didn't have to pay people and you could pump out more stuff. So really, I think it was profit that drove it. Yeah, although conditions, you know, got better for the workers, at least in the West.
Yeah, but like the cotton gin cemented enslavement in the American South, right? Like that was a new technology that made the work easier and it did not make people's lives better.
Well, this, yeah.
This also, last thing, Nikola Tesla wanted to give away power. The exact opposite of what Elon Musk is doing right now. Like he'd be rolling in his grave if he knew this company was named after him.
I know. And I think that's where people don't realize that all the green energy, it's not green. Like that comes, people have to dig that out of communities and the communities are destroyed and it's hell on earth for the people that live in them, but the Western people don't know. And it's so extreme, kind of you can't deal with it and people shut off. Yeah, it's interesting. I just think the AI, yeah, like the Lensa thing that went off, the writing, you know, maybe I'll be put out. Most of my work comes through writing. And I think AI will be able to do that pretty soon. Just feed the work I've already done into it and off it goes. That's not going to benefit me or any astrologer. Yeah. No, what do you think, Alyssia?
Yeah, I feel like what you're talking about with this AI, I already see, you know, my friends that may not be as politicized, like they're like, Chat GPT is great for my job. I don't have to write emails anymore. I'm tired. And it's like, it's fun until it's not fun anymore. And I think like also, I mean, I feel like we note this a lot with Pluto and Aquarius as the French Revolution happened during Pluto and Aquarius. And so like, you know, making sure that it's not our heads rolling, but that it is like the bourgeoisie, or, you know, it is a time in which there is a reckoning for the mega rich who have been like deeply oppressing people. And like what do we want that reckoning to look like, and how do we have a reckoning that doesn't just replace like a structure of oppression with a new structure of oppression? I think like those are kind of the big things that I'm thinking of, is like, instead of what am I fighting against, what am I fighting for? And what are we fighting for? And I think it's, you know, it sometimes gets lost when we've been fighting so hard and just fueled by so much pain and so much suffering.
I think a lot of people forget to put out the manifesto, like what the vision, what could it look like exactly. So that's, yeah, it's a really good reminder. What is it that you want? You know, it's important to define what you don't want and what's wrong and find words for that and learn how to make a boundary with that. But you've got to create the future. You've got to lay something out for, you know, a lot of people don't really have the vision or the words. They just know that they want something, but what is that? So maybe that's the Aquarian stepping into their power and, you know, creating that and really powering up you know, Pluto across the sun, which Aquarians will have, you know, the sun is self or personal, and Pluto's power, so personal power.
Yeah, I mean, we have to be careful we don't end up with another Napoleon, because that was the tail end of the French Revolution and of Pluto and Aquarius.
Yeah, right. Yes, and they do say power corrupts, and I would agree. And who was that, you, Rose, saying that before? You know, you've got to be careful you don't end up with someone that just, you know, you put the person in power and then it's the same cycle again, which I agree. People can't handle the power. I think it's a very rare person that could not lose their feet on the ground. Like, yeah, power does corrupt, and you lose sight because then everyone else around you wants some and they'll agree with you, or doesn't work.
The only people who should be in power are the people who have no interest in being in power. That's the problem. The people who want to be in charge are the first ones to get to the back of the line. Like, nope, no.
But then people that, aren't driven to or aren't interested, how do they even get there? Yeah.
Well, shifting it to like an understanding of the responsibility, right? That it's not about control or like enforcing your will. It's that like if you are in charge, you're actually responsible to these people.
I like that self-governing, like groups of, it's very Aquarian groups where everyone takes a vote, everyone's informed. I don't know how else you could do it. More like a true democracy, you know, maybe then those groups come together and it's a larger, more drawn out, takes more time, but it seems like it would be more egalitarian and fair and interesting at least. And people, you know, actually get to vote and chat about what's important to them in their community, and not some little group over here that's completely out of touch making all the decisions. We'll see. I mean, it's a nice long transit, so I hope that it's interesting in a good way.
Yeah, I feel like I love, you know, for me, I like non-hierarchy. I also feel like with non-hierarchy, we also have to unlearn all the biases that we've been taught within the context of capitalism and oppression, right? Because we don't want to have like all of us vote for the same thing because that's all we know.
Exactly.
Like, I want us all to like be able to envision and to be able to think of life in a way that is like anti-oppressive and communal and like also self-sustaining and like in honor of like the earth, not to, you know, be on my Miss America shit, but I
love Miss America.
I do
Miss
really
Universe.
think about the earth in this moment and like the way like animals and insects and all the creatures of the earth like structure their own little societies in themselves.
Yeah.
And what Rose was saying about mushrooms, I'm like, I would love a mushroomocracy.
It'd be so sick. Give me in that mycelial council.
Yeah, mushrooms are really mushrooming right now.
Killing it. They're killing it and then eating it and then rebirthing it, you know?
Yeah, that network. It's interesting that that's come through during, you know, a planet in Aquarius, and people are really relating to that and seeing that, I guess, using that as an example of interconnectedness as well. And Alyssa, that brings us back again to what you were saying, having to have a vision. Someone needs to put the vision out there, or a communal conversation where you look at the positives, look at what you want, not entirely what you don't want. You do have to be clear on what you don't want. But yeah, look at what you want, put it out there, people with visions, because not everyone can get past, you know, their conditioning and what they've been taught. It does take a certain mind, and that is very much an Aquarian mind, I think, to think outside, break out of that box and be at least far enough to the edges to look that way and then look that way. That's a big deal. It's definitely important not to underrate that. Aquarians, this is your time.
See what happens.
See what happens. I know. I'm looking forward to the trine. Pluto and Libra generation. I'm like, this is our time. Finally.
Oh yeah, it's been a brutal run.
Well, I had Pluto. I've got 5 planets in Sagittarius, and I did have it transit by conjunction those 5 planets, and then square my moon Chiron. So I've definitely, it's not that bad at all. The square was pretty bad, but not that bad. But yeah, I really felt like it was that personal power with the conjunction with Sag. And that was during the 9/11. Travel just got crap. But as soon as Pluto went into Sagittarius, that's when I got on an airplane and took off and went international and just was traveling and had the time of my life. Like, I lived for that moment, and found astrology overseas while I was away. You know, it was great. So I was getting the conjunction, which was also a sextile to Pluto sextile. So it was a great time. And when it went over Mercury Venus conjunction in the 8th house, no less, it was coming into a square, but I was really psychic. It was the Pluto, like you're living in the, Brian Clark says, like, you are inverted. So this is daytime and you're standing up and everything inverts and you're sort of upside down in Hades, like in the underground. And it was true. I felt like I was in this lower level of insight, you know, and just could see into people, their darkness.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it was really, but in a detached way, in a curious way, in a like, oh, is that right? Just the laser vision. It's a super interesting transit. It's just not very nice by square.
Yeah, I have Pluto in my 8th natally, trine Mercury in my 12th.
Trine.
Yeah.
Wow.
So when you started talking about that, yeah, you drop in and you just in the under. I'm like, oh yeah, that's like every random conversation I have with somebody.
You get all the insights,
all kinds of wild shit. Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty cool. I've got it natally square, that Mercury. So it's stuff I just don't want to know. But I always find out. Which I tell people, like, don't do anything you don't want me to know, because I'll find out. People, it just comes to me. Someone will tell me. I'll have a dream and a voice will tell me in the dream eventually, if I keep ignoring it long enough. What about you, Alyssa? What about your natal Pluto? What's happening there?
Oh my God. Pluto in the 4th house in Scorpio.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel the same, where it's like, if you cross me, my ancestors will tell me in a dream what you did. And like, there were times where they would show me and I'd be like, oh no, that person wouldn't do that. And like 3 days later, I'd be like,
Wow.
Jesus, you know?
Oh.
And I definitely have that a sextile where Pluto is sextiling my Mercury in Capricorn, nice. And I've felt the conjunction throughout all of my planets in Capricorn.
Yeah. And is that your 6th house also?
Yes.
Oh, friend.
Right.
Right. So I think, like, for me, you know, I feel like I've lived many lives, but when I graduated college, I did a summer at Cornell University to learn how to be a labor researcher. And I did this 100-page paper on like this company so that workers could organize a union against them. And that was my Mercury-Pluto conjunction. So it was like deep research and, you know, supporting people against the man. And I mean, I love like what that sextile has done. I would say that it's definitely like, for me, the conjunctions have been like me, like kind of naively going into things, like wandering in, seeing all the brutality and the power and being like, oh my goodness. And then coming out like wizened and like jaded and being like, oh wow, people are kind of terrible.
It's powerful though, isn't it? It's a really powerful transit. And you get something out of it. You want to apply it like that. You picked up the sextile, I guess. So it was extra goodness for you. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was helping other people. So like, it's fine. It was definitely just like, whoa. Oh my God.
Right. Turn towards service, right? That's a 6th house option for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And it's an Aquarius situation. So let's take it to books, because Aquarius got books. That's for sure. And I noticed Alyssa in the first place because I think we were in the queer astrology conference together, and we had a bit of communication, and we were reading the same book, which I thought was a super interesting book. So of course, if someone's reading it, I'm like, oh wow, you're reading that, that's awesome. So that was Sylvia Federici's Caliban and the Witch. And so I was like, she's cool, she's reading that, which is such an Aquarius Sagittarius connection over the books. So I wanted to hear some top book recommendations from both of you in terms of what was really pivotal, because there's always going to be some pivotal books or a pivotal book, right? So let's start with you, Alyssa, since we had the book connection.
Yeah, I wish I could get Sylvia's, like, her birthday is kind of murky. Like, there's conflicting sources, because I want to be like, I want to claim her, but maybe not.
Did you try emailing her?
Oh, maybe. She's actually very sweet to meet in person. When I met her in person, she like grabbed my hands and urged me to write, and then kissed me all over my face.
Oh my
gosh. I was like, I love you.
That's great.
Nice.
Email. She'll probably return the email if she knows the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for books, I have two people, Antonio Gramsci and Audre Lorde. And then for songs, George Michael and the Thong Song by Cisco. So
Thong Song, that is unexpected.
So yeah. I'm gonna go into it, but I'm gonna try to be brief because I know we have some time. But Antonio Gramsci was an Italian Marxist who was imprisoned and, is ruled by a 12th house Mars in Pisces, but he has an Aquarius sun and a Jupiter in Aquarius. And at the time when he was like publishing his work and talking about his work, the Marxists were like, this is too humanist. But today we talk about him in his theory of hegemony because he correctly identified the spheres of power which govern our society now, which I think was interesting. Like during his life, he was kind of like exiled, but now we use him so much. And of course, one of the most influential authors of my life, Audre Lorde, who is a sun at 29 degrees Aquarius. She has a Saturn at 20 and a Venus at 8 degrees retrograde. And her book, Zami, the way she writes about women is just so delicious and beautiful. And she's a Black lesbian author who was growing up kind of like 1920s, 1930s. And Zami, the book, like, it starts with her growing up in Harlem and then her journey into like college and teaching and going to Mexico and meeting someone. And I feel like as much as it is like a look at her life, it is also a look at like how relationships with women can change and shape your life and how you see the world. So
very nice. And I love that you have them. Before we go to you, Rose, I just have a quick question. Because you both have these 4th and 8th house placements, my question is that which do you think would be ancestral? The ancestor connection, ancestral has come up over the last couple of years. Alyssa, you seem to have something to say about this because you've already mentioned the 4th and that things come in dreams. So yeah, this is a question I've had for a while. So thoughts, because I've got planets in neither.
Ancestors of the land in the 4th, ancestors of the collective, and the guides of the collective in the 8th, is what I see. Like, I feel like the 4th also has to do with like fairies and all of those beings that help guide us. But I'll let Rose answer too.
I mean, a lot. So there's like half of my ideas around house placements come from study, and then the other half come just from working with clients. And I have to say that I've seen ancestral stuff like come up in all three of the water houses, if you want to call them that, the fourth, eighth, and the 12th, if you want to call them that. I found that like inherited shit that you have to figure out often shows up in the eighth house. I find actual connection to family lineage, particularly matrilineage, comes from the fourth house. Though parents switch, people have all kinds of different kinds of families. Like fourth, 10th, I don't assign to anybody. Same with Sun, Saturn, Moon. And then 12th always seems like unfinished business or some fucked up shit that happened right before you were born, right?
Yes. Well, I'll say 8th because I do have planets in there. I was really obsessed with ghosts and ghost stories. Same. And I've got, yeah, right. Well, I think that to me is 8th because it rings really true. So it's like maybe the lost spirits, or it can be anyone's ghost, really. I don't really care. It's just ghosts. Rather than maybe a lineage, they're just kind of in there. And I've had a few inheritances because I've got Venus in there conjunct Mercury, and everyone just dies and leaves me stuff. So, of course, especially when Pluto went through, it was just like drop, 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 drop. Here's some cash. Yeah, it's definitely not it doesn't feel like the ancestors that people are talking about ancestral. It definitely is not that fourth house vibe. It's very, it's just ghost stories and esoteric metaphysical stuff. And looking kind of Plutonic, looking into people, the ideas around, I guess, the darker side, but I've got Sag planets in there. So it's just like, no, I want everything to be friendly. Sometimes can't deal, but then really curious about how it all works. But what are we going to do about it to make it Sagittarian?
Wait a second, though. I feel like you skipped over something very important, Vanessa, which is the thong song as an Aquarius song. That
my God, yes. How was this pivotal?
Okay. So my first published work in the Mountain Astrologer is the astrology of the thong song. And it is a deep dive into why the thong song is truly an Aquarius anthem. The thong song was born or released with a 25-degree Aquarius sun, Uranus at 17, Neptune at 4 degrees, and the South Node at 2 degrees Aquarius. And the way Cisco describes like the birth of the song is like him and his friends were looking for women who wore thongs. It was like a pilgrimage. And he was in the studio and found a woman with a thong and was like so excited that he was singing that thong, 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 and they put it in the song.
Oh my gosh. Sitting around with his mates.
Yes. And like my last person that I want to highlight in terms of music is George Michael. He has a Cancer sun, but a Saturn and Aquarius at 22 degrees Aquarius. And when I think of like Aquarius anthems, I think about Fast Love and that music video where it's like so many people of like different like kinds of attractiveness and genders, like dancing, and like Fast Love, to be honest, to me is like very an Aquarian concept, right? Of being kind of like someone's person for a night, being what someone likes, and maybe not so much focusing on the deep emotional connection, but kind of like getting your fetish, getting your fantasy, and like having a fun time.
And the people, having the connection with different people. Yeah. Don't fence me in.
Yeah, don't tell me what to like.
Yes.
True. I'm glad we didn't miss that.
I'm just thinking it's taking me back to the 2000s when there were just so many planets in Aquarius. It was just the best time. I loved it. I just want to say that. It was so great. It was such a breath of fresh air and there was a lot of change. And again, it just shows how, you know, there's the general transits and what's happening in the world, and then how it plays in and grounds down into your own chart. And obviously anything in air and fire sets off my whole chart. Anything not in fire, it's not really doing much because I've got one planet in water and none in earth. Everything's in air and fire. So it's all just goes one, it's like a spider web. One thing gets struck and it shoots all over the chart. So it lights up. So it was just so lit up during that period. So I live for the Aquarius placements basically, and fire. And then just have to get through the earth placement and do something practical. So Rose, do you have a pivotal book? I like this pivotal song idea. I didn't think of that, but yes.
I have pivotal books, and I had to separate them into astrological and not. So I won't share much individually about the books, but I'll tell you the books so that I don't take up too much time. Stonebutch Blues and Ruby Fruit Jungle, both
classic,
smashed my world open. Yep. Similarly, I remember when I read Beloved by Toni Morrison in 9th grade, like I didn't know you could write like that. Like I was just like, what the fuck? This is like a ghost story and historical fiction and also just like gripping. Like, and I was like, oh, there are so many ways to use language. Bastard Out of Carolina by Dorothy Allison. Also, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. I loved Southern Gothic short fiction in high school, like Tennessee Williams, Truman Capote. Let's stop there. Anne Carson, Eros the Bittersweet, blew my skull open. Another Mother Tongue by Judy Gran. I don't know if either of you have read that. It's post second wavy parts of it, but it's not super gender heavy, and it's definitely not like weird biological determinism, but it basically is gathering together queer folklore from all over the world, from indigenous people, from Celtic people, from people all over the place, and kind of condensing and figuring out like, why do we talk about the pinky ring? Why is the color purple a gay color? So that like also to have a queer history and to have it tied to folklore and fairy tales just felt very grounding and centering, and to feel like I had this lineage. Girl Walking Backwards by Bette Williams. I used to do this thing where I go to the library and look around and then type in lesbian into the search bar.
Look around. Fashion.
I was like 11 or 12 or something. And then, I'd like bury it. I'd put like other books on top of it, like just boring ass, like book about amphibians or whatever on top. Housekeeping by Marilyn Robinson. I don't know if that book is heartbreaking. It's about this house that passes through the generations. But again, like, I remember being very high on an edible in college on an airplane, reading that book and listening to Beach House and just being like, what the fuck? And then Lydia Davis's translation of Swan's Way by Proust and her short fiction. Like I devoured that. She has like short stories that are one sentence long, right? And I was like, oh, right. There's anybody who really helped open up some flexibility around what it means to write. And for astrology, The Astrological Houses by Dane Rudyard was when I finally understood what houses meant.
Helpful.
The Gods of Change by Howard Suspordis. Rob Hand's Horoscope and Symbol. Sue Tompkins' Aspects in Astrology. Astrology, Karma, and the Four Elements by Stephen Arroyo. The Book of Pluto by Stephen Forrest, and Astrology and Fate by Liz Green. Like all of those books really inform my practice and kind of my understanding. And like those were all books that were like a real light bulb for me that like opened up. I was like, oh, okay, I get it now. Oh, okay, this is what that means.
So many books, so many. Well, I'm going to share one of my pivotal ones two early on ones, and they're fairly random. One was like when I was really young, was like just a little children's book called The Chirk and Deuce, and it was this egg that was sat on by all the different animals and, you know, ducks and chickens and this and that, had to look after it. So to me, it's very Aquarian because it's so random, and the whole animal community helped this little egg hatch. And so when it hatched, it was like this mix of all things, and it walked really funny, and it just didn't fit in anywhere. And it makes me want to cry talking about it. So sad. I really related. So it just didn't fit in. So it was pushed to the margins, and everyone's like, oh, you're ugly. What even are you? And then this fox comes to like kill everyone, and the freaking Chirkandoo saves the day because it freaks the fox out so much. And it, you know, it braves up and it's in there, you know, trying to save everyone. And it couldn't, I think it sang when it walked, like it couldn't do things normally. And the fox was so freaked out, it ran off. And so then it was a hero, and everyone loved it, and it was accepted.
Nice.
How Aquarius is that? That might be my Chiron moon speaking as well in the 11th house. And then that stayed with me for a long time, Golden Circle book. And then this is in primary school, The Girl with the Silver Eyes. So it was about a thalidomide baby. You know, the big thalidomide drama. Someone had written this creative story, which I thought was great. And she had silver eyes, and she found out she could move. What's the telekinetic? She could move things, and she was like all psychic. So my 8th house was loving that. Like, oh yeah, like this is a metaphysical kind of, like the first thing I had come across that wasn't a horror movie. So that was like, oh, this can happen. Also, the social side of, you know, the whole thalidomide thing, because my dad told me what that was all about when I asked, and I was like, oh, don't trust the medical system from pretty early on after learning that at, I don't know, age 7. Anyway, I think that brings us to pretty much wrapping it up. Do we have anything else to share? Oh, I will say, it made me think of when we were talking about Pluto in Aquarius. I was thinking about it'll be maybe great for astrology, because astrology is Aquarian. We assume sort of books, writing, publishing, but AI is going to freaking be writing them, possibly. Didn't see that coming. I'm just thinking now, like, oh, I was feeling quite idealistic about it. Like, this could be good. People started reading more during lockdowns, and publishing is actually going quite well. But AI will be maybe writing them, because who's going to pay a writer when an AI will do it for not very much money once you have a subscription?
Yeah, but AI doesn't seem to be able to do much beyond cookbook
Not yet,
right? And so it's like the synthesis and the nuance is the reason to hire an astrologer, you know?
Well, we say that now. We've got 20-year run. A lot can happen. A lot can happen.
Get programmed out of our jobs.
Maybe. I don't know. What do you think, Alyssa? Like, are you seeing the future with this?
I mean, I feel like this is why I put a lot of my content behind a paywall, so it doesn't feed like those. I mean, but we also need to make money, right? And write for publications and like say the things, right? So I feel like for me, I am protective of my writing, and protective of like where I share things. And I think like with Elon taking over Twitter, you know, I have seen a lot of astrologers pull back on Twitter on what they're sharing publicly. And like, you know, with Instagram, it's like we have so many scammers that I also see astrologers pulling back on Instagram. So I think for me, it's like, I hope that we are able to put our energy into books and other forms of media that cannot be easily stolen. And I also think that we probably have to get smarter about security culture. You know, what are some ways in which, like, are we publishing these things on PDF so a text reader can't skim it? Like what are the next ways that we can share our work and share our insights without plagiarism, either from our colleagues or from AI?
It's a good point. I've only just started realizing this, like the amount that I've already put on there. It's like, I feel like it's too late. For me now, I started my blog in 2011 or 12. And yeah, interesting. Same with the voices. I was thinking, gosh, something could just capture the voice and the face, and AI can deliver the whole package. It's so weird to think about, isn't it? I know.
They can never replace your personality.
I don't know. That's what people are paying me for. I don't think it is. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. I think you just move with the changes and you adapt and think ahead, and kind of, resistance is futile sometimes. And maybe maybe there's always a silver lining, like community.
I just want to point out that you quoted the Borg of Locutus, which is very Pluto and Aquarius.
Did I?
That line, resistance is futile, is from a Star
Trek. That one, yes. The Borg. Yes.
We are the Borg.
Well, they do say, hive mind, or they group think with as a shadow side of Pluto and Aquarius. I've seen that a bit, and I agree, because then the shadow is also the Leo, and the individual, the celebrity, the VIP, the leader you go into. And we've certainly seen these big group think. Like, I felt like, like you can see in Twitter or big movements, because of the internet, can just be like a wave, like a Mexican wave. And it feels like high school. It's really immature. It's a lot of young, immature people behind their computer, not taking responsibility. And these movements just move like so quickly. And I just went to the library. If that ever happened at high school or school, I'd be like, oh, I'm an only child. I'm not getting involved in all this drama. I'm out.
I mean, it's interesting too that you bring that up, because the Pluto and Leo generation is having a Pluto opposition, right? And I think that there is a lot of kind of hemming and hawing from the older boomers about us and our woke culture, and how, like, how we are attacking their legacy or everything we built. And like also a lot of projection of how self-centered we are, when I'm like, my friends, you have Pluto and Leo. I think you know a thing or two about being self-centered.
Yeah, because you're being self-centered, not centered on them.
Yeah. Like, that's, we were raised in a different time.
And that's the hey boomer, like the millennial Pluto and Scorpio square.
Oh yeah.
From that particular generation, for sure. Yeah. Like Pluto and Libra will just be like, yes, you're fabulous. Can I borrow the car? Okay, dear. Because that's our parents.
Yeah, I've gotten a couple tussles with Pluto and Leo in my day. And I think like there is I do see waves of like whoever gets the first punch online gets the first say, and I don't think that's right. And I also see some astrologers really struggling with how to take like grounded accountability. There are absolutely times where I've said things on social media and people are like, ouch, like, don't do that. And I've been like, oh, right. Like, I'll take it down, or, and I apologize. And it's like, we're all socialized by capitalism. We all watch TV and we unconsciously have these biases. And so for me, I'm like, is this a moment where someone online is like attacking me, attacking my character? Or is this person very activated? How do I not match that activation while taking some grounded accountability? And like, I did a presentation on Saturday on like, how do we ground ourselves in our bodies in this age of like Neptunian getting swept up in other people's shit? And I think it's like, when things get heated online, we got to take a step back and we have to be like, what do I know? Is this my fight? Is this something I want to get involved in? Maybe it is. Maybe someone's being like violently oppressive towards a mentor. We got to step up. Maybe it isn't. Maybe someone's just like popping off and it needs a moment. It's like, okay, I'm gonna let you rock and you go yell in your Twitter area and I will stay here and be me.
Yeah, let's end off on this kind of area. I have been thinking about, that idea of, Pluto, Aquarius being astrology. If, I hope that astrology gets stronger, more power to it and survives, and that we as an astrological community come in very aware and conscious and thoughtful. And that's a really good point. Just being conscious about, is this my fight? What's going on here? What would an Aquarian do? They'd step back for a minute and they'd have a conversation. My Pluto and Libra is like, let's just like have a debate and have a mediator. Obviously, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but there's a debate happening right now. And I don't, Alyssa knows. And I don't think it's being handled as well as it could. And I think the takeaway is to think about, well, what would that look like and what could that be? Because that splitting is happening everywhere and it's so easy to fall into. And I would like, as a community, we support each other, even though we may practice very differently. Internal fighting or cutting others down in the community is not helping ourselves or the astrology or the community as a whole. Like, you have to really agree to disagree, which I think is very Aquarian, and come at things more as either live and let live, or lead with curiosity, like, well, what's happened here to start this off, for astrology just to survive and really thrive.
Are you talking about the whole
like, I think it's also to stop subbing people and to directly confront it, right? Because I think, like, as I'm learning about the conflicts of yesteryear, that some of these conflicts have been happening for decades at this point, I think it's really important for elders and for the oral history to be recorded, right? I actually loved seeing Demetra's face, and I love seeing Rob Hand, and I am really grateful that this oral history is being captured. So maybe it's just my Jupiterian nature seeing the silver lining of this conflict.
Absolutely.
But to me, I'm a little happy that it's happening, because I do really love hearing from some of these people.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's been quite valuable, actually, as well as, having me think about, how would one handle something like this? Or how else could we have done it? Yeah, there's been all this great historical stuff and actually very generous sharing from all parties concerned. Rose?
You're talking about the whole house denialism.
Yeah.
Whole Michigas.
as Mercury conjuncted Pluto, yes.
Yeah. I mean, for me, what it comes down to is why do you practice astrology? Like, do you practice astrology because you want to hold authority and say this is the only way, or do you practice astrology because it helps you feel connected to something? Do you practice astrology because you like the community? Do you practice astrology because you like to connect with people around it and try to find what's useful and expansive for them, right? So it's like, for me, my work with clients is probably the thing that gives me the greatest sense of purpose and connection around astrology, and helping people look at a placement or an aspect that 3 other astrologers told them was some kind of trap that they couldn't escape, and helping them find a different way to look at it or experience or express it. And if we find synchronicities or patterning or cycling that feels more apparent or resonant in one house system than another, I'm going to go with that, But like, for me, the tools are the tools. Is what are you building with them? What are you making with them, right? Like, you might use a short claw hammer and I use a long claw hammer. Does it matter if we're still building a structure that is stable and helps uplift people?
Exactly. Yeah. It's just like
that's all I'm saying.
Yeah. There's no point fighting for a dominance of one system when there are many, which is very Aquarian, and there's many ways.
And consistency and curiosity, like, I don't care what your process is. I just care that you have a process. And
Yeah.
if it works for the people that you work with, if it works for the content you create, if it resonates, like, that's it, bing. Like, Anne Orderly on her podcast this week was like, are we arguing over the same true religion? Like, like, are you going to tell Buddhists or people who practice Judaism or people who practice Islam and different sects, are you going to tell them that theirs isn't right? It's like, you have what you practice with, what resonates for you, right?
I just think astrology is, it's like definitely a framework. There's rules to each system. Whichever system you use, know what they are, use it as the framework. And I think a lot of it is actually intuitive, because there's 1,000 different answers or ways one particular thing could go, but hey, you just picked out the right one, and that was the intuition. So you might use tarot and not even astrology, whatever. Yeah. Anywho, let's end it on that note. Any parting words for people to get them through this Aquarian time coming up that we're already in?
Have fun, like, just enjoy. I feel like there's so much to enjoy with Aquarius season. The sun is in the gayest sign, right? Or I shouldn't say that. That's gonna make people upset. The sun is in a very gay sign. And I think we should be as different and excitable and sexy as possible right now.
Yes. And Rose?
I mean, I think definitely have fun and bring some humor into it. You got to take a step back, really think about where you're trying to go and who can help you along the way, and focus on forging those connections and kind of creating the community that you need and want, right? Because the institutions are failing. They're not here for us. We're all we've got. And that's actually quite a bit.
It's a lot. So direct from the Aquarians themselves, solar Aquarians. So where can we find you? Let's revisit that for people. Alyssa?
Yes, so you can find me on Twitter or Instagram at Alyssia of Cups, Alyssia of Cups. And you can find my website at alyssia.space. So ALYSSIA.SPACE. You can see my fundraiser. I am not taking clients right now. I am medically fundraising, so my teeth are healthy and happy, and my adrenal glands are happy and functional. So yeah, folks can find me there, and I would love to hear what you think of this episode.
So have a look at what Alyssa's doing, and you'll be back in the saddle as well once this is all sorted out, which it will be, I'm sure. And Rose, where can people find you?
People can find me on my website, www.rose, that's ROSE roseblakelock.com. I was about to give you my Gmail address. ROSEBLAKELOCK.com. You can also find me on Instagram at Mutable Cross. It's MUTABLE_CROSS. You can listen to my podcast, Big Dyke Energy. And I actually have another podcast coming out this spring called Mutual Reception that I'm excited about.
Excellent.
Yeah. And my books are open. I offer sliding scale consultations for single people, for couples, and then I also offer 2 extra discounted readings a month for folks who are struggling financially, and I prioritize queer and trans and BIPOC folks for those slots. And that is that.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for coming on and representing Aquarians. I think that was a very Aquarius episode. Went a little over time, but that's okay. That's on brand for me. I'm just going to stop the recording now. Everyone have a great season of Aquarius and a great 20-year run with Pluto through Aquarius.